Greetings, this is Ron Smalek, and I'm reading Catching Fire. This is the second book in the Hunger Games trilogy by Suzanne Collins. I'm reading the book and giving you my thoughts on each chapter in groups of two. Hope you enjoy. Alright, so for Chapter 7 of Catching Fire, I wanted to start off first and kind of clarify my expectations for what I want in this book. I feel like I'm far enough in that I can talk about how it's, in my estimation, going to compare with the last book, which I liked a lot. So the reason that I picked up this series to begin with, or really listened to any of the hype, was because of the games itself. I feel like that's very interesting. I'm a big fan of survival versus the elements out in the wilderness. I'm a big fan of games in general. I'm also slightly curious or slightly interested in the whole uprising aspect. I don't know what the end will be or where, how far into that this series will go, but I would love to see sort of how this underdog district, performs guerrilla attacks and fights back and things like that. I'm not really too interested in this series for the relationships. I pretty much intend to suffer through it, and so far I think they've actually been presented realistically because of Katniss's first-person perspective and the way that she weighs her options and thinks through it actually feels pretty good to me. I'm not at all interested in the politics. Uh, I'm slightly interested in the cultural aspects, so what goes on in the capitals versus the districts, which I think I talked about in my last video being so far apart. But anyway, that's sort of my frame of mind for how I'm looking at the series at this point. So Katniss is spending a Sunday in the woods, and she's thinking through a lot of things, and one of them is a memory that she has of time spent with Madge, where they talked about the Mockingjay symbol and how the Mockingjays were known for repeating human messages and basically mutated to be messengers or something like that, or to be spies. And Katniss has also been worried about, how the Capitol has been I won't say following her around, but knowing what she's been up to the past couple months. And this suddenly, sort of made a little light bulb go off in my mind. Wouldn't it be ironic if that Mockingjay pin that Katniss has is actually bugged or a tracker that's been tracking her movements? Now, let's just assume for a minute that that might be the case. She originally got it from Madge, so could Madge have been given it to her as a plant through the mayor? Was the mayor told by Snow to give it to her, or was Madge totally innocent? But when she was in the Capitol and Cinna gave it back to her while she was getting her costume on, could Cinna have actually replaced it with a bug, replaced the actual pin, which was just a normal pin with a bug? So I don't know if this is true. This is just me speculating because I like to try to draw conclusions from things that I read. So back to the story, Katniss is going through the woods and she goes to her favorite lake. This time she leaves a trail that she believes Gale will be able to follow. If you remember, she's never taken anyone to this lake before. And he shows up rather quickly, so that must, in my mind, mean he was kind of keeping tabs on where she was. She reveals to him President Snow's threat to their families, etc., and she basically lays out the cards on the table for him. And what might be my favorite part in this book so far is when Gale says, "I love you," and Katniss says, "I know," which is a total Han Solo. It's got to be an allusion to and a tip of the hat to Empire Strikes Back, because that was awesome. So Gale and Katniss, they wisely discuss, how realistic it would be to try and escape as their party size keeps growing. Katniss's family plus Gale's family plus Peeta plus Haymitch plus all these other people that are going to potentially have to go with them to run away. And then Gale also points out that it will be hard in the wilderness at winter. And up till this point, I don't think they directly mentioned what season it was, but I hadn't really been thinking about, oh yeah, winter must be coming. So far, everything's happened in what I guess would be the summer. So Katniss lets slip that District 8 was in an uprising. Sorry. And I actually didn't realize that she was holding this information back from him, which shows that she already was thinking through what Gale was going to react to. And sure enough, that basically means that, Gale basically says, well, uprising, I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying here to help it succeed and to fight. Um, so they depart, sort of, not in a happy way. Um, Now Katniss goes back to Peeta, lets him know what's going on, and Peeta basically says, "You're not going to go anywhere. Like, you can talk about it all you want, but you know you'll never leave," and basically implying that with Gale staying behind. That was at least my impression. So they're walking through the district, and they come across a crowd, which I guess is in the middle of the district somewhere, and the crowd is telling Katniss to get back. Katniss is pushing her way through the crowd. I think I'm probably reading into this a little bit more, but I think there are equal parts worried about Katniss being, and I'm going to spoil what happens next, but Katniss being arrested for poaching, as well as equal part, worried how she will react when she sees what's going on. And what actually is going on is that Gale is there being whipped by the head peacekeeper. So, of course, chapter 8 begins. Katniss is throwing herself between the whip of the peacekeeper and Gale, and she's shouting because Gale's apparently been whipped quite badly. She also sees as she was moving forward that Darius, which was one of the peacekeepers that was somewhat friendly to them, lying knocked out on the ground, and she automatically assumes that Darius had been stepping up to defend um, Gale because the peacekeeper who's whipping Gale she's never seen before. It's not Cray, the head peacekeeper that we knew from before. Um, Immediately at this part, I thought, well, did Gale attack the peacekeeper and she's just looking at it from the wrong angle? But we will find out that Darius actually did try to step in. Now, Haymitch steps in at this point because Katniss is whipped in the side of the face and it's all swollen. And then Peeta steps in as well, and they're both trying to sort of um, calm down this new peacekeeper. It actually doesn't get resolved until Pernia, which is a female peacekeeper that's been in District 12 for quite a while, steps in and says that the punishment, according to the rules, is more than doled out, so he can stop. And that's when Romulus Thread, which is the new head peacekeeper, backs down. But you can basically tell from this point he's going to be a real jerk. Now, as the crowd is breaking up, some of the miners come and try to help take Gale back to Katniss's mom so she can heal him. And we actually see a point where Haymitch slips them some money on the sly. He gives them some coins, and Katniss notices this. So that is interesting because I guess I never thought that Haymitch was that invested in what's happening in his district. They always portray him as this drunk, he's off on his own, and yet we see him doing these things to help out the district. So just another interesting sort of contrasting element. There's a pretty long section next on Gale's injuries and how he's being treated. I didn't particularly get too excited about this section, except for one point where Katniss's mom basically says, to Haymitch, so it's starting again. And this really made me wonder if she's talking about uprisings in general that have happened maybe before Katniss was born, or if this has happened, around the last Quell, the 25-year mark where Haymitch was in the games. Was Haymitch somehow playing the role of Katniss where he won the game and started inciting an uprising, and that's why he's a drunk? So I'm really interested in what this phrase is going to play out to mean. Madge shows up, and she brings Morphling, which is basically morphine as far as I can tell, but it must be genetically engineered. I thought that was an interesting little twist. And Katniss is sort of immediately thinking, why is Madge bringing medicine for Gale? This is expensive stuff. It's illegal. She could get in a lot of trouble. Do Gale and Madge have a thing going? I hope that's not the case. I think it's just that Madge is being Katniss's friend. So Katniss continues her internal debate, and she thinks through. This is one part that I really like Katniss, because she actually puts herself in Gale's shoes and thinks through the situation if the tables were turned. If Gale was in the Hunger Games and, met some girl that he needed to pair up with to survive, and then came back, how would Katniss feel about him? And I really like this part of her character. Shortly afterwards, she has another discussion with Peeta, and basically we find out, Peeta was right all along. She goes in, she talks to Gale, and she tells Gale she's not going anywhere. She's going to stay with him and help fight. So that pretty much sets the stage for the rest of the book, I think. One note that doesn't have anything to do with the story, but as I'm reading through this book on my iPad, I suddenly noticed like some passages were underlined, and I had never seen this before in any of the other books that I read or in the first book. And I kind of clicked over that section, and it gives me a count of how many people have highlighted the same passage. And I found it interesting that there's like thousands of people highlighting certain passages in the book. And I don't know how to enable or disable this on my iPad, so I'm just going to ignore it. But what I noticed about these passages is it wasn't any of the things that I was necessarily touching on, but it seemed more like what I would call inspirational quotes, where Katniss, resolves to do something, or where a revelation kind of hits her and makes her decide her own fate. So I just thought that was an interesting commentary on who's reading these books, and if because I touched on that link to see what it was, if that recorded myself as one of the people highlighting these passages as well. So I may bring up some of those quotes in future episodes. But that was it for chapters 7 and 8, and I'll see you next time.